Well, that sucked. I mean, I guess it wasn't terrible if you take out the first 10 minutes and the last two and a half. In fact, it's actually pretty good if you do that, but yeah, heartbreaking end to that one. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R. The Seattle Kraken nearly complete the best comeback in franchise history, but in the end, blow what was a completed comeback and end up losing anyway, 5-4 to the Ottawa Senators. And it was certainly a game where I think the sentiment shared by at least McCann and Dunn afterwards is one shared by pretty much all Kraken fans. One of this being a hard one to swallow, a game where the Kraken really did have a heroic comeback. Again, that building was absolutely rocking, but in the end, they just were not able to complete it, even to get to overtime and get 1 point out of this game. So, well, they'll have to look for that in back-to-back games against Dallas here coming up. Especially considering that in the same night, all three of those other teams in Vegas, Edmonton, and LA that are fighting for those top spots in the Pacific won on the road against pretty good teams, with Edmonton handing Boston a rare home loss in regulation, the Kraken, of course, being the first team to do that this season earlier on, and then also Vegas winning in Tampa Bay, and LA winning in Colorado. So with all that having been said about this unfortunate night for the Kraken, to put it lightly, not only in the game they played, but also in the other games relevant to them around the league, let's just get into this one and move on from it. Hopefully into a new winning streak that the Kraken have a chance to start here in these back-to-back games against Dallas, which, if they are able to win both of those games and win at least one of them in regulation, they can jump Dallas, who at the moment leads the Central Division. That being said, Dallas will be coming into it coming off of a win in this same night, where they won 10-4 over the Buffalo Sabres. So it's definitely a team that can score some goals. And that being the case, it should go without saying that the Kraken will definitely need to do better at starting on time in that game, or both of those games, than they did in this one against Ottawa, where, although as we get into the game, the Kraken, I do feel like, actually got off to the better start and had more time in their offensive end than Ottawa had in the Kraken end. Ottawa was getting more shots on goal, and eventually they're the one that finds the back of the net first. It comes on a tight angle shot that Grubauer actually makes a save on, but unfortunately lets up a rebound that goes right out in front of the net, where Pinto managed to sneak up behind Susie, and it lands right in front of him. He's able to smack it into the back of the net, which does pull him into lone possession of second place in rookie goal scoring, still 2 behind Beniers with his 17th of the season. Beniers at the moment sitting on 19, looking for his 20th, and still easily leading in points. But Pinto, one of, like we saw with McTavish in the previous game against the Ducks, those players that if they had a really hot end of the season and Beniers was to have a big fall off, could maybe challenge him for the Calder. Still unlikely, but this is a matchup between the two leading rookie goal scorers. And as far as the game is concerned, it's really nothing to worry about too much. Sure, it's not an ideal start, but again, the Kraken do seem to be getting the better of the flow of play, at least to me anyway at this point, and they continue to do so over the next few minutes, right up until, once again against the flow of play, certainly more so even probably than the first goal, Ottawa once again finds the back of the Kraken net. This one is on a bit of a broken entry into the offensive end, where, kind of like the Kraken did in the last game, they just create something out of nothing. A pass from the boards gets out into the slot that's mishandled and kind of in the feet of one of the defenders entering the offensive end for the Sens, but he's able to get the pass back to Jacob Chychrun, who's following him in. Chychrun gets the shot off, and it goes right past Grubauer's short side to give the Sens that 2-0 lead. And it is a nice shot from Chychrun that goes top corner, bar down and in, but it also goes short side with not a ton of space there, and probably should have been even less than there was, over the glove of Grubauer that he probably was holding a little bit lower than you'd like to see. Still, this is probably more on the defense, allowing Chychrun to get that shot off from the slot. And still, even if this one was a little bit more on the defense than it was on Grubauer, I do think that it's worth mentioning that at least the replay anyway does make it look like Grubauer certainly wasn't seeing the puck or tracking it as well on this play as we've been used to seeing him do over these last couple of months plus, where he's been mostly fantastic for the Kraken. And with that being the case, whether or not you agree, it certainly was the case just a few seconds later, when Ottawa, once again on a rush chance and a shot from a pretty similar spot, make it 3-0, getting one past Grubauer, as this one hits him in the side but leaks past him, certainly one he should have had. And Ottawa now just laying it on with that 3-0 lead, 3 goals on their first 8 shots. Which point, and I think pretty understandably, Hackstall calls timeout with, the opponent up 3-0 less than 10 minutes into the first period, but doesn't end up pulling Grubauer, which we just recently saw him willing to pull Jones, having let in 3 goals and not seeing the puck that well at the start of a second period, and now Grubauer's let in as many, also not seeming like he's really seeing the puck all that well on this night. Granted, the defense was a little bit more shaky in front of him in this game than it was in front of Jones in that one. Of course, another difference between that situation where Jones got pulled and this one where Grubauer gets left in is the fact that when Jones got pulled, that game was still tied. And in this case, it seemed like it was getting out of reach pretty quick. Whatever the reason, though, it still seemed interesting that they chose to leave Grubauer in this scenario, and for what it's worth, it seems like it works as he doesn't let another goal in for quite a while. And on top of that, although the Senators up 3-0 do end up getting a power play here shortly after this third one goes in for them, and it's actually a pretty dangerous power play that they get a number of chances on, but Grubauer is obviously able to make all those saves, and then at the other end of the ice, on the one shorthanded shot on goal that the Kraken get during this power play, on a 2-on-1 rush chance, McCann firing off the shot. Actually, Sogard does end up making the save as well, but it rebounds off of him, and then goes off of Shabbat as he's coming in on the net, off his shin pad and into the back of the net for an own goal, basically. I mean, McCann ends up getting credit. It's a fortunate bounce for McCann and the Kraken as they at least get one on the board and pulled it within 2 with the shorthanded goal in McCann's 32nd of the season. And it is goals like this one from McCann that really make me wish that they would give him more ice time per game than they have been giving him. I mean, if nothing else, and this isn't to take anything away from McCann, obviously he's doing something right because he keeps scoring from that same spot on his weak side, which is kind of weird, but again, he keeps scoring from there, so obviously keep trying it. But even outside of the great wrist shot that he has to make that happen, he also has that very high shooting percentage, which is certainly helped by goals like this one, where it kind of just seems like all season he's had, well, kind of the opposite luck of Bjorkstrand, and I don't know, I guess a horseshoe up his ass. Anyway, the point is that he keeps finding the back of the net in one way or another, which the Kraken will certainly take. And add the cherry on top of his third shorthanded goal of the season, the Kraken are able to kill off the rest of this penalty, and then play does even out for the rest of the first period, which I suppose with pretty much everything other than that shorthanded goal going the way of the Senators so far, honestly you'll take, and we get to the end of one, with the Kraken still down 3-1, but certainly a game that now feels much more manageable down just 2 than it did leading into that power play. Of course, it certainly isn't ideal that the Kraken would finish the first and start the second once again on the penalty kill, and once again the Senators would get a number of chances that Grubauer would have to save, but he's able to do that, and although the Kraken don't get a second shorthanded goal here, they do once again end up killing it off, and getting into the flow of the second period, still down just 2. Which, not long after they finish off this kill, turns into them being down just 1, as they get back into the offensive end, cycle the puck for a second, and then it's a shot from Dunn, deflected in front and into the net to give the Kraken their second goal of the game, pulling them to within 1 like I just said. And although I will say that after watching this replay a number of times, I'm still not really sure who actually ended up tipping this one in, either Chychrun or Schwartz, but they end up awarding it to Schwartz and never changing it, so Dunn's shot ends up getting tipped in by Schwartz. The Kraken, whoever ends up scoring it, do end up getting that important second goal here still early on in the second. Considering this is a team that had never come back from a 3-point deficit at any point in the game to win it, maybe it was starting to feel like tonight was the night. A feeling that only gets more steam when the Kraken, not long after this, end up getting their first power play of the game, which unfortunately does end up coming up empty after they themselves get a number of shots, but those are all saved. And then not long after it, it's Ottawa back to the power play once again, because it was just that kind of night for the Senators on the power play a number of times. This one, though, finally the Kraken are able to kill off pretty cleanly. And then right at the end of it, they're able to get a rush chance down the other way. Just as the penalty's ending, McCann ends up with the puck on a 2-on-1 break the other way, and he's looking at the penalty box the entire way through the neutral zone, waiting for Sprong to come out, hoping that he'll come out in time to lead Sprong off for a breakaway. But Sprong, partially because he was standing on the wrong side of the door and had to go around the attendant to get back out on the ice, but honestly, he got out of it pretty quick anyway. McCann ends up holding onto this puck, eventually after entering the offensive zone, passing it to the other side for Yanni Gourde, who then is the one that gets it all the way back to the other side for Sprong getting into the play. Sprong fires off the shot, and while it doesn't go in clean, it looks like it's saved out in front. It hops up in the air, and then somehow, someway ends up going into the net. It did look like McCann batted in with a high stick, and certainly the protests from the Senators right away afterwards, while they threw their sticks up in the air like they were celebrating with the Kraken, it was more that they were trying to signal that this one they thought had been hidden by a high stick by McCann. But what actually ends up happening is Sprong's shot goes off of the stick of McCann before even getting to Sogard and going over him clean. Before McCann can whack it again, he ends up missing what might have been a high stick. So fortunately, he ends up missing the second attempt. Either way, it goes off the shaft of his stick and into the net to give the Kraken their third goal and complete the 3-goal comeback. And of course, once again, there's McCann with that lucky stick, with the, we'll call it a good hands-eye coordination play to tip this puck in front of Sogard before he can make the save on the Sprong shot, but then maybe a little bit lucky that he doesn't hit it again with what probably would have been a high stick to take the goal away, and it still goes into the net anyway to give McCann his second on the game and 33rd of the season. It is, however, a now completed 3-goal comeback to at least tie the game, which, come to think of it, I think it's only the second time the Kraken have even done that, coming back to tie a game down 3 regardless of what the outcome is in the end. The only other time I can remember them doing that was the home game last season against the Blue Jackets, where I think they did the entire comeback of 3 goals in the third period. So one of the most exciting games that I've seen in that arena, which was especially a standout last season where there are not a ton of those. Either way, they nearly throw that all away almost immediately after the second one from McCann, as the Senators press hard to take back the lead, getting a number of shots on goal, but eventually do come up short as Grubauer is able to make the saves. Still, the Senators do end up getting another power play out of it, as that was pretty much just how this game went officiating-wise. Just parade to the box of Kraken players. Meanwhile, they only end up getting the one power play of their own in a game that was pretty chippy both ways, and certainly could have featured, honestly, more calls both ways, but certainly more calls that sent the Kraken to the power play. In the end, the Kraken, they do end up killing this one off, so they end up going 4 for 4, well, killing off all 4 of the Ottawa Senators' power plays and going 0 for 1 of their own. Which, I suppose, with the shorthanded goal, they still end up going positive on the night, special teams-wise, but still, this was not the cleanest officiated game, certainly, as reflected by a second home game in a row with very loud and very audible ref you suck chants following a traded calls that sent the play to 4-on-4 between Alexiak and I don't remember who it was, one of the Ottawa Senators players who cross-checked each other. Both of them got sent to the box instead of just the Senators player. That all aside, by the time the dust settles, play once again evens out for the last few minutes of the second period, and we get to the end of 2 with the score still tied at 3. And early on in the third, once again, the Kraken are able to get into the offensive zone, hold it, cycling the puck a couple of times, even partially completing a change with the puck in the offensive end, just not allowing the Senators to get it across that blue line. Once again, just like early on in the second, it's Vince Dunn who eventually fires off the shot and scores to give the Kraken the 4-3 lead, coming all the way back to not just tie the game, but take that lead. And the Kraken are going to do it. They're going to get that first ever win after being down by 3 or more goals. Or at least that's how it felt for just over 30 seconds, as they are still announcing the done goal to give the Kraken the lead. And once again, the Senators back in the offensive end on a rush chance because the Kraken just can't seem to figure out how to lock down their defensive end after scoring a goal. And it's, well, speaking of last season, pretty reminiscent of last season with that important goal in the third period. They allow the quick response, as it's pretty similar to the second and third goals from the first period by the Senators. Another harmless pass from the top of the circle and a shot from the high slot from Giroux that just cleanly beats Grubauer to tie the game at 4. Now, I know what you might be thinking at this point, and honestly, it's what I was thinking at the time. Yeah, that really sucks that the Kraken lead after that great comeback only lasted for about 30 seconds. But there's still plenty of this third period left for the Kraken to come back and retake the lead and end up winning this game. After all, they've been pretty handily outplaying the Senators ever since those first 10 minutes of the game where they didn't outplay them outside of the penalties, but even those they've been able to kill off and score on one of them and right after a second. But although the Kraken do get their chances here and there throughout the rest of this third period, and to be fair, the Senators get there as well, it kind of just felt like the Kraken were content with trying to get this game to overtime, where, granted, if it did get there, they've been fantastic in overtime, winning their last 7 games that have been decided there. Of course, there's the shootout where they probably would have lost if it had gotten there, but at least they would have gotten the point. And wouldn't you know it, but it's eventually that complacent, let's just get to overtime and get at least a point out of this game attitude that the Kraken certainly seem to have for at least the last few minutes of this third period, if not the vast majority of it, but eventually comes back to bite them with 2.5 minutes left, and also a little bit of hockey luck karma from that first McCann goal that ends up going in off of Shabbat, as the Kraken actually, come to think of it, I forgot to mention this with the 4th Senators goal, that quick response one to retie the game, was off of a defensive zone turnover. While this one isn't necessarily off of a defensive zone turnover, it is a bobbled puck in the defensive zone that eventually allows it to get on the stick of DeBrincat down in the corner. And while he's not trying to shoot the puck, he just throws it in front of the net, hoping to get it past Borgen into whoever's teammate was. I think it was actually Pinto again on the far side of Borgen for the tip-in. Fortunately, it doesn't get to Pinto, but unfortunately, that lucky bounce comes when Borgen is able to get his stick on it, but isn't able to shove it out of the net, and instead it goes off of Borgen's stick, right through the 5-hole of Grubauer, who's trying to get to that far post to block the shot from Pinto, or the tip-in from Pinto, and into the back of the net to give the Senators the goal and that late 5-4 lead. But the Kraken, although they did have a kind of admirable, I guess, push with the net empty in the last minute of this game, they aren't able to retie the game and end up losing this one 5-4 in regulation. So there you have it. One of the worst starts to a game we've seen from the Kraken in recent memory. I mean, obviously there's the Toronto game, but going back to that horrendous start against the Oilers at home a little while ago, there aren't too many games the Kraken have started worse than they do this one. Even still, they're able to respond, fight through the adversity of a number of calls going against them throughout the middle of this game to come all the way back to not just tie the game, but take the lead. Then immediately give it up by allowing a quick response goal and then just getting complacent and not showing urgency throughout the rest of the third period. Eventually, all it takes when you play that way and play for overtime is one bounce to go against you to not get to overtime and end up losing both points. Which is what happens here. The Kraken don't come out of this one with anything in a game where, against the Senators team who's pushing for the playoffs, so it's definitely not a pushover team or anything like that, and have been playing pretty well of late. It's still a team that the Kraken needed to at least get 1, if not 2 points against at home. Especially again on a night where all 3 of their division rivals, who are right in that hunt at the top of the Pacific with them, all got wins against good teams on the road. And just to be clear, since I know there are some people that are going to want to pin this one on Grubauer, while he certainly had one of his worst games in these last couple of months, where he's been mostly fantastic, like I said in the beginning, this game was as much on the defense as it was on Grubauer, and all the advanced stats point to that. I mean, you can just look at this game score graph where that dark blue that's almost all in the negative for the majority of the Kraken lineup, that's their defensive performance, with only a couple of guys even in the positive, and again, the vast majority pretty well in the negative. As for the Kraken 3 stars in this game, there were at least 3 guys that played well enough for stars, maybe even more than that, but 3 certainly stood out. Obviously, the first one's got to be Jared McCann with the 2 goals to get the Kraken on the board in the first place with that shorthanded one, even if he got helped out a bit with some luck there. And also the third one where we'll give him the credit for a good hands-eye coordination play on that tip in front of the net to tie the game up at 3. Also, outside of that, he was just one of the best players for the Kraken in the offensive end, and even defensively, he had a positive impact, which is more than you could say for the majority of the lineup. Another guy that fits that same bill with a couple of points on the night and being one of the, I don't know if you could say bright spot, but certainly not negative spot on the defensive end, was Vince Dunn, who had a fantastic night for the Kraken, ends up getting a goal and an assist of his own. And then the third star, who was probably the best Kraken player in this game, I would say all things considered, just didn't quite have the impact on the score sheet of the other two. Not quite the same finishing power as them, which is the only reason I have him at 3 rather than 1 or 2, would be Yanni Gourde. Obviously, certainly helping to stir the pot when it came to the chippiness of this game as well, which in this one seemed to maybe serve the Senators a little bit better when it came to getting power plays than the Kraken, but it's certainly just a part of his game that's fun to watch if nothing else. But anyway, that's pretty much all I really feel like saying about this game. I was so ready to have a incredibly fun time with this video and just have a great time with the Kraken finally having that great 3-goal comeback to end up winning a game. So the fact that they do end up losing it after taking that lead in the third period was pretty deflating. The good news is we don't have to sit on it for too long as they play again on Saturday, that first game against Dallas, and then get this weird thing where they end up playing Dallas again at home a couple days later, which they'll end up doing with Nashville like a week after that. But anyway, we'll have to hope the Kraken can at least get 2 points. I think they need to get at least 2 points here out of these next two against Dallas. 3 or 4 points would obviously be ideal. We'll just have to wait and see, though. Until then, let me know what you thought of this game down in the comment section below. And until next time, stay safe out there. Be good to each other. Bless and go Kraken.